Welcome, everybody, to our seventh podcast. And I'm Linda, and here's Mike with a few words to start with. Then we'll answer two viewer questions before we resume the studying of the book.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. In this podcast series, I'll remind you we are exploring and discussing social threefolding, which is we're studying the original book on this subject called The Core Points of the Social Question, which was written by Rudolf Steiner in 1919. So, very briefly, on many levels today, we are dealing with various kinds of social dysfunction. And we need to develop new thinking to build new social institutions, and then these will in turn reinforce our new social thinking. So, part of the thinking is that society must restructure into three areas. The cultural life must become free and autonomous on the one hand, while the economic life on the other will be governed through associations of people working in collaboration. And in between these two, there emerges a third area, a new rights state, a kind of more limited government that will focus on the equality of people and a fair rights consciousness. So that's what we're doing in this podcast series.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much. And here's the first question, the viewer question. I'm wondering for a listener who may want to get involved locally in something like this, what may be the first practical steps? And what common misunderstandings should beginners avoid when first learning about this idea?
Okay, well, this is a great question. I would say that the first practical step is actually to gain an understanding of the idea of social threefolding that is as thorough and deep as possible. It really does require a new thinking, and this new thinking takes time to develop. I think there's a danger of rushing into things and doing what we might believe to be the right thing without having fully transformed our thinking. And then in doing what we believe is right, we actually only perpetuate the old. And then the deeper underlying root causes of social dysfunction are not addressed. So then society just continues to drift along from one social band-aid to another, and we never actually bring about what is necessary, which is the genuine social healing on a deeper level. So I would suggest let's take the time to really learn about social threefolding before we dive into taking action with only a partial understanding. I would strongly suggest studying this Core Points book in some depth, for example, and live with the ideas for a while. Let the living ideas this book presents grow within you like a garden grows. And then you will see what you might want to do, and you will know what your next steps are. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. And I like the analogy of the garden because, in a garden, there are weeds that grow as well.
Yes.
We need to
Yeah, we
identify
shouldn't.
them.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time watering the weeds
Hmm.
and cutting the blossoms, as Warren Buffett once said. We're,
Hmm.
we're investing in the wrong things.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Mike. And the second question is, describe a concrete short scenario showing all three members, free cultural life, economic associations, and the rights life, collaborating to solve one problem. For example, a local food shortage.
Okay. So this is another really good question. How does social threefolding solve this or that specific problem? And I would say that yes, social threefolding would be able to address many of the problems we face today, but it is by no means a utopia that will make all our world free of problems. I
Hmm.
also want to emphasize that social threefolding is not a problem-solving tool or a strategy per se. It might be better understood as a social restructuring that allows human freedom to emerge and be realized. So things like food shortages, which have to do with agricultural practices, climate, economic mechanisms, politics, and many other factors combined, a lot of our social problems like this may not be immediately solvable. Not because people aren't smart enough, or because they don't care enough, or because they don't work hard enough, but because of the current structuring of our whole social paradigm. Social threefolding describes a restructuring into a whole new paradigm. It requires a paradigm shift in the sense of Thomas Kuhn. It requires new thinking, a whole new pattern of thinking, not just a few thoughts about this or that. So that would be a band-aid approach, I just said, right? So many of our problems follow from the whole system, and they can't be solved by looking at the parts. We have to look at wholes. And as I said, we have to take the social healing to a deeper level than we have until now. Social threefolding represents an evolutionary step forward for humanity. It's much more than just a problem-solving tool or strategy. But I think once we have gained a deeper understanding of all of what social threefolding entails, people will be able to apply their new thinking to the existing problems and come up with practical solutions. So I would just suggest just be patient. We'll get there. We
Hmm.
have to start at the right end. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I mean, it's sounding like a lot of work and a lot of deep contemplation and understanding in order to get to this point where you really get, it can be born from within you that how to be in that new shifted paradigm, I guess. And just as a side question, um, who is Thomas Kuhn?
Oh, he wrote a book in the 60s called in the 1960s called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Okay.
He examined different scientific paradigms and how they would suddenly like people were locked into a certain way of thinking about science,
Hmm.
and then they would suddenly shift to a new paradigm, and he studied these paradigm shifts. And
Oh,
he realized they kind of came as a whole. People wouldn't believe the data. They would
okay.
dismiss the data because their thinking didn't allow that data to be true. And then once they changed their thinking, then suddenly the data made sense. And I think
Hmm.
this is the same with our society. We have so many dysfunctions, but we just can't process the data. We just
Hmm.
dismiss it as being the data can't be right.
Hmm.
And by changing our paradigm, it suddenly all will make sense. And then we can fit these things into our mind, as it were.
Got it.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind that it is human freedom that
Hmm.
we are that's I think that's a really key sort of um understanding that that is the what we're heading towards, hopefully, because any of the systems you can that exist today, I don't know how free we are,
Yeah.
right? In
Not very.
any of
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Well, most of our institutions are inheritances of
Hmm.
from hierarchical structures, from
Hmm.
monarchies, pharaohs, all kinds of religious leadership. And
Hmm.
we've inherited and we've maybe evolved them a little, but our
Hmm.
whole paradigm has not essentially shifted,
Hmm.
right? Even the French Revolution has replaced the king with an elected leader.
Right.
We haven't fundamentally changed. I mean, we've certainly changed some things, but
Hmm.
the paradigm is still, how does this leader help us? And
Right.
I think the first step is really the new thinking has to feed into a new leadership. And
Hmm.
then the new leadership can build new institutions that
Hmm.
are compatible with human freedom. And then people can find their way into these institutions, these arrangements, we'll say. And then through these arrangements, people will then start to understand it on a wider scale.
Right. Okay. More food for thought.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So if we are ready, and I guess, shall we go back
Yep.
to the book?
Yeah. So last time we had, if you recall, we finished the prefaces and we started reading the first chapter. We began with the question that Steiner had posed a century ago in 1919, that given the immense tragedy of World War I, should this not bring us to realize that something is wrong with our society and with our thinking about society? So he asked this
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
And he says the ruling classes had tried to repress what lives in people as an impulse for change. But there have been times, and we have seen many times over the course of the 20th century and now in the 21st century as well, where we could say cracks arise, so to speak, and the deep, indestructible human impulse for social change becomes visible.
Mhm.
So if we look back, we can see how the forces of the left, that is, the forces of labor and the working class, have at times had the upper hand. And they
Mhm.
have brought about social change in one direction. And we can see how at other times the forces of the right, that is the forces of capital and the ruling classes, have also at times had the upper hand and have brought about social change in another direction. So it's been a kind of back and forth. And the question is, when will we finally see that instead of this continual tug of war of left versus right or labor versus capital, that we actually need both, and that
Mhm.
society only prospers in a free and fair way if both are in balance with one another. So social threefolding is, it sees a possible way forward beyond this dualism so that the free cultural life has its independence, the economy has its independence, and then in between a truly independent rights life arises that brings about a fair balance. So from dualism to three, yeah, it's the contention of social threefolding that we will never be able to resolve this back and forth of the social dualism until we take the step to bring about a threefold social structure. We must come to see society as a living organism, which will live in a healthy way only if there's this restructuring, this separation into three social areas.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's kind of what we were starting to talk about last time.
Right.
Any
Yes.
questions? You are we ready to go on?
I'm I'm ready to go.
Okay, so let's switch over to the screen share. One
Okay.
sec. So last time we had started to read chapter one, the true form of the social question, and we had got as far as reading this third paragraph, some personalities, right? So in that paragraph, I'll just recap before we start the next paragraph. So that paragraph was about how influential individualities within the ruling classes did not understand the deeper impulses of the working class. They thought that military victory would bring about unity and would calm the social storms. However, in fact, the opposite occurred, and their failure to win World War I, that is the Germans, only fanned the flames of social unrest in Germany. And now the ruling classes have no choice but to act in accordance with what is demanded by the socialists and the social democrats, that is the left people, who have gained so much strength. That was the last paragraph we had read.
Okay.
And so now we're ready to go on to the new, I think.
Yes.
Okay. So then on page 24, it starts, and now that a decisive stage. So
Hmm.
I'm going to just warm it up. It's a short little paragraph.
Hmm.
And basically, he's going to say that something like, for some time now, our social thinking has not evolved at the same pace as social reality has evolved. Our social ideas are no match for the current social facts. Most
Hmm.
people today find themselves ill-equipped to tackle the current social challenges. That is, they cannot grasp the social question as it presents itself today. Okay, would you like to read that, please, Linda?
Yes. And now that a decisive stage has begun, one that has been brewing for decades in the evolving life of humanity, now it becomes a tragic fate that the thoughts that arose as the facts evolved are no match for the current facts. Many personalities who developed their thoughts as the facts evolved in order to serve the social goal of these evolving facts are capable today of little or nothing when it comes to the fateful questions posed by the current facts. There's a lot of facts.
Yeah. So he means the what's happening on the ground, right? So when we
Mm,
look at what's happening on the ground and our thinking, there isn't necessarily a strong match. That
mm,
that our thinking doesn't fit or match what's happening on the ground. And I think this is also true today. Very often there's some things going on in people, and our way of conceptualizing what's going on are not really accurately connected.
mhm. Okay. So is he when he's talking about the thinking, is he talking about the thinking of the leadership specifically, or just everyone and anyone?
I think he's saying anyone and everyone because,
Okay.
yeah, and he'll go on to elaborate on this point. Yeah, he means
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
So
Good to know.
so those
Hmm.
in the, let's say those in power, say the right wing types, the capitalists, the leaders, the powerful, the industrialists, they have a certain way of thinking about what's happening. And the left wing, the workers, the laborers, the people, the ordinary people, they have a certain way of thinking about what's going on. And
Yeah.
first of all, those thinking are different.
Hmm.
And secondly, he's suggesting that neither one of them is really um, grounded in the actual facts,
Hmm. Hmm.
because
Okay.
our thinking has not evolved
Hmm.
in this at
Hmm.
the same pace as the facts.
Yes. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Got it. Yes, it does.
And I
And
think
yes,
that's true today.
I was gonna say absolutely. I could see that absolutely. And there's not a congruence in understanding of, any like there's so many silos of what is truth in fact.
Mhm. Yeah,
Using the word fact again.
exactly. You're right. We
Yeah.
have we have this set of facts and those set of facts.
Yeah.
That's what he's pointing to, is that there's
Mm.
there's like a bifurcation of fact groups, and neither one of these are really entirely accurate.
I like that word bifurcation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's saying, so he said this 100 years ago. I think
Yeah,
it's very prescient.
I would say so. Yeah. Yeah.
Shall we move
Makes it.
on?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So the next paragraph is a little longer.
Hmm.
There's some really super long paragraphs, but this is longer.
Hmm.
And what he's going to say here next is some members of the ruling classes still believe that they can regain control over society by restoring the traditional order, despite the demands of the majority. But this will never happen. The new demands are just too powerful. Nevertheless, traditional party ideologies continue to walk among us like zombies. Yeah. Although, of course, the older parties have evolved somewhat, their habits of thinking have not kept pace with the evolving reality. Our times call for a clear understanding of social reality. The current tragedy, he means the war, arose out of a misunderstanding of the true aspirations of the working class. This was a misunderstanding on the part of the ruling classes as well as on the part of the working classes themselves, who are unable to form a correct judgment about their own will. So this speaks to
Mm,
what you just said. Would you like to
mm.
read it, please?
Yes, indeed. Some of these personalities still believe that what they have long thought necessary to reshape human life will be realized, and then prove powerful enough to give a viable direction to the requisite facts. We can disregard the opinion of those who even now imagine that the old must be able to hold up against the newer demands of a large part of humanity. We can turn our gaze to the will of those who are convinced of the need for a new way of life. But we cannot help but admit to ourselves, party opinions walk among us like judgment zombies, rejected by the evolution of facts. These facts demand decisions for which the judgments of the old parties are not prepared. Such parties have certainly developed along with the facts, but their habits of thinking have lagged behind the facts. Perhaps we need not be immodest in relation to views that are still considered authoritative today, if we believe we can glean what has just been indicated from the course of world events at the present time. We can draw the conclusion from this that this present age in particular must be receptive to the attempt to characterize what in the social life of modern humanity is far removed from what is peculiar about the habits of thought of socially oriented personalities and party tendencies. For it could well be that the tragedy that comes to light in the attempts to solve the social question is rooted precisely in a misunderstanding of the true proletarian aspirations, in a misunderstanding even on the part of those whose views have grown out of these aspirations, because people do not always form the right judgment about their own will. True.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so he's addressing what you had asked previously about, is this
Mm,
a problem of thinking of the ruling classes or the working classes? And he's
mm,
saying both, that the ruling
mhm,
classes don't understand what the working classes are on about,
mhm,
but the working class, it's like it's something that lives in the will much more than in their conscious mind. And so the struggle is to kind of put your finger on it. And I think this is true today. People, many people feel there's something wrong, yeah, but they
mhm,
can't put their finger on it, or they'll say this part or that part, or they'll point to these different parts without
mhm,
realizing it's a whole. It's actually the
mhm,
whole thing is
mhm,
wrong.
mhm,
The structure is wrong.
mhm,
We've inherited an old society that just doesn't work for us anymore. This is the fundamental problem.
mhm, mhm. It kind of reminds me actually in therapy where, we're trying to solve something in our lives and we're pointing to, I mean, a lot of people, I know a lot of people will say, oh, if only this particular thing will change, maybe I'll change my hairstyle, maybe I'll change my nose or a part of my body to make it more, to make it better, and then people will love me, and then my life will be better. But they're, they know something is wrong. They know they need to do something about what is wrong, but they're not quite putting their finger on it and understanding that there is a root to all of this, you know, this system. Maybe there needs to be more love in the system. Just saying. It kind of reminds me of that, actually.
Yes, and I think exactly this sort of body image, this it's actually a part of a larger framework of social, how we are experiencing the social life,
Yeah.
and it's actually a really a kind of an outcome of our sick society, I think, that's being reflected in our, we identify it as a personal thing. It's not a personal thing. It's actually
Hmm.
outside of us, and we
Hmm.
don't understand the mirroring that's happening. And
Right.
I think he's saying in those days too, the workers didn't understand, and the whole first chapter is about this. The workers didn't see things properly, and so they projected it. They basically said, "Oh, if only we had more economic justice, then we'd
Hmm.
be happy. You know, if
Hmm.
only we got paid more, a bigger share of the pie or whatever, then we'd all be happy."
Hmm.
And Steiner says this is actually a kind of utopia. This is a kind of, if you got these things, you'd still be dissatisfied because
Hmm.
these are not actually the root cause. I mean, it's
Hmm.
nice to have more. I'm not saying that this isn't necessary, but we
Hmm.
did see in the 20th century a lot more progress. Things are a lot less Dickensian than they were 100,
Hmm.
150 years ago, but people are still not happy
Yeah.
in many cases. Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
Sorry, Mike. I just really I think what needs to be also said in this is that each of us are creators of the society, and it is the individual that it, that comes together with other people. And if my internal world is filled with self-hatred because of, that is there's this major cycle that you're talking about that is so important, because as we're born into the world, into the world of judgments and dualities, and we're experiencing life, the the hurts and the, if we actually, it's not just a societal thing, that it is a societal thing, but it's also an internal thing as well.
Yeah. And
So
that's
yeah.
what I'm trying to say is we could do all the work of working on ourselves,
Mm,
but and that's a great thing. But it's not enough. We have to also change the outer structures also,
mhm.
because if we are changed inwardly, but the outward life isn't changed, we're going to be continually confronted by this a
Yes.
negative force, and it's
Yeah.
like a force of nature. It's just way more powerful than the individual, and we just can never. We'll be exhausted
Hmm.
by trying to fight against a bad society, a sick
Hmm.
society. If
Hmm.
we're healthy in a sick society, we will eventually become sick. We will not make the society healthy. We have to change the structure of society fundamentally, and then it will have a positive, it will work positively and help us
Yeah.
with our
Yeah.
self change.
Most definitely. I mean, we can see this in small ways when, say, we're not well. I know that people who have, let's just say, depression or mental issues in Switzerland, they're taken to this beautiful place where there's mountains and greenery and just lush beauty. And the shift that happens within them versus the stressors of their day-to-day life, right? And I'm not saying that we all need to live in a mountain in Switzerland, but the what you're talking about, we can see if there is a shift from one thing, from living in a stressful, uncaring environment, perhaps maybe it's caring, but doesn't have the means to be supportive enough for that soul, then that person goes in to that other environment where people are paid to specifically look after these people, right? Who are dealing with whatever challenges, and that brings about some kind of shift for them. So, not
Exactly.
all
And
the picture, yeah, but yeah.
well, I kind of I would call this like the vacation syndrome, right? We're in a job, we're kind of worn down. We go to a place like Switzerland, or it could be anywhere, where we receive this wonderful regenerative
Hmm.
healing experience. But then what happens is we go back home.
Yeah.
And we haven't really changed the fundamental structure of home.
Yeah.
And so we find ourselves back in this negative environment, and we just go into this cycle.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is social threefolding is about how do we change the environment at home so that we don't have to go on vacation, that we're actually in a healing place all the time. And
Mm.
this has a positive, it works upon us
Hmm.
in a
Hmm.
positive way instead of always in this negative way that we have to fight against.
Right.
That's a great analogy.
Mm. I'm really glad we had this conversation, because it really, I think it's a fundamental part of why are we doing this,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Thank
again,
you.
it's not going to be a utopia. It's not going to be
No.
perfect, but
Hmm.
it's just we have to recognize that what we have right now is really bad. It's sick.
Mm.
We live in a toxic, sick society, and
Mm.
we I don't think we fully recognize it.
Yeah.
We always think it's my fault. It's not my fault. It's a structural issue. It's an architectural issue,
Mm.
right? Okay. So let's move on to the next paragraph.
Hmm.
It's on page 25. It may therefore seem. So in this paragraph, Steiner is going to say, it's not a long paragraph. So let us ask, what is the will? underlying the working class movement. How does this will, this impulse, relate to what we think? Can we even approach the social question with our current thinking, or do we need to think in a different way? And how can we understand the experience of the modern working class person?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. It may, therefore, seem justified to ask the following questions. What really is the will of the modern proletarian movement? Does this will correspond to what is usually thought about this will from the proletarian or non-proletarian side? Does what many people think about the social question reveal the true form of this question, or is it necessary to think in a completely different direction? This last question cannot be approached without bias if our life's fate has not positioned us to be familiar with the soul life of the modern proletariat, and specifically that part of this proletariat who has the most input into the shape of the current social movement has taken on.
Okay. So
Hmm.
so essentially, yeah, he's speaking about the true form of the social question. So he's suggesting that people don't understand the social question, that is the left-right question or the labor
Hmm.
versus capital question. They don't really truly understand it.
Hmm.
They have a kind of maybe misperception of what this question is even about.
Hmm.
And so just asking, he's sort of opening a direction for the rest of the chapter. How can we understand this true form of the social question?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So maybe we'll just go on and start reading what he thinks we should do instead. Um,
Yes.
the next paragraph says basically that um, consider how modern technology and modern capitalism evolved,
Hmm.
and how did the modern working class, arise? How did this working class come to demand what it now demands?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, understanding this evolution is clouded by the half-truth that people are shaped by external circumstances. The other half of this truth is that inner soul and spiritual impulses shape people independently of outer circumstances. So the external evolution of technology and capitalism does not fully explain what lives in the genuine impulses of people. And as long as we do not penetrate into these deeper impulses, we will not grasp the true form of the social question. Okay?
Yes. This kind of touches on what we were talking about before, which is interesting. Okay. Much has been said about the evolution of modern technology and modern capitalism. It has been asked how the current proletariat arose within this evolution, and how it came to its demands through the evolution of modern economic life. In all that has been put forward in this direction, much is pertinent. Yet something crucial remains untouched that can appear obvious to anyone who does not let themselves be hypnotized by the judgment. External circumstances shape people's lives. This is clear to anyone who maintains an unbiased view into the soul impulses at work from inner depths. Certainly, the proletarian demands have developed during the life of modern technology and modern capitalism. But insight into this fact does not provide any explanation regarding what actually lives in these demands as purely human impulses. And as long as we do not penetrate into the life of these impulses, we will also not come to grips with the true form of the social question. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's basically saying that, if we're only looking at it from an outside in perspective, he's saying there's something rising up within the human being itself of an impulse, of a will that's changing. And I think what he's hinting at is the will towards freedom.
Hmm.
We have a will to have free will, as it were.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
our society doesn't allow this. It doesn't the institutions, the structures are just not made for free human will on the part of the large majority of people. They're actually designed to be hierarchical, to that the will of the people serves the leader. And so we haven't really understood what this left-right struggle is about because we're
Hmm.
hypnotized by the wrong ideas about this. You know?
Hmm. What comes to mind are companies that have leaders that really understand that each human can be a leader themselves. And, maybe few and far between, I don't know. I do know of some that really encourage leadership. And they have this capitalist sort of um, ideology, but at the same time understand that they could not be if it were not for the people. So they have that fundamental understanding of both are important. So you see structures like that and companies like that with beautiful leadership qualities in all its employees, and they do hiring by mindset and not just skills,
Mhm.
which is, I think, a step in the right direction, would you say?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. The, I think this is called intrapreneurialism. So
Oh, okay. There's a
if
word
you've
for
heard,
it.
yeah,
Okay.
well, yeah, I think that's what it's called. The entrepreneurialism is kind of the ability to take initiative and do do something in the society, whereas intrapreneurialism is doing that within the corporate structure. So having it structured so that people can take initiative inside an organization
Hmm.
and not have to break away and start their own organization all the time. I mean, this is very inefficient.
Hmm.
And so corporations they provide a kind of practice ground for innovation and social experimentation. But I want to say again, it's a little bit of a fish out of the water situation because even if you have a very interesting and innovative social structure of a corporation, if it's embedded within an unhealthy society, it will only go so far, right? This is
Okay.
the problem is that we'll, like the individual, we can do all the change we want, but we'll eventually come up against the opposite forces coming, the negative disease forces coming from a diseased society.
Mm.
And so I'm not putting these people down in any way. I'm just saying this
Hmm.
isn't enough. We need to also restructure society as well
Hmm. Hmm.
because we this can't come just merely by will.
Hmm.
It's really a matter of changing institutions and new thinking replacing new institutions
Okay.
in society. It's a threefold restructuring.
Hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if we're ready to go on, this next paragraph is very, very long. It's actually more than a page.
Oh,
So I'm going to break it down into two parts, if that's all right.
yes.
So it starts on the end of 25, one expression. And if we can just go down to right here, do you see where it says, because when we express such an opinion, it's about two-thirds of the way down the page?
Okay, let me just find it.
Because when we express.
Yes, I found it.
Okay. So if you could just read from the part where it says one expression at the top
Hmm.
until just before that, uh,
Yes.
because when we express. And so I'll summarize it first or warm it up. So he's going to be talking about this notion of class consciousness. So the proletarian strives to be class conscious, which means they strive to be aware that they form a special, specific social class of people, distinct from the ruling classes, with their own interests. The working class is conscious that, as a separate social class, it generates significant value for society. And so, in our times, the idea of class consciousness is fundamental to the social concept of the working class. And above all, scientific teachings about the economic life have ignited something in the soul of the proletarian. Non-proletarians can generally form only vague ideas about what is going on with people they consider to be merely uneducated. It is not simply the case that the working class has somehow been persuaded by the rational arguments put forth by Marx and other socialist writers. Okay, we'll dive into this.
Okay. One expression that is often widely used in the proletarian world can make a significant impression on anyone who is able to penetrate the deeper driving forces of human will. It is this: the modern proletarian has become class conscious. They no longer follow instinctively, unconsciously, so to speak, the impulses of classes other than their own. They know themselves to be a member of a special class and are willing to bring to bear in public life the relation of their class to the other classes in a way consistent with their interests. Anyone with an ability to pick up on psychological undercurrents will be directed by the term class conscious. In the context in which the modern proletarian uses it, towards highly important facts in the social conception of life of those working classes who stand within the life of modern technology and modern capitalism, such a person must above all pay attention to how scientific teachings about economic life and its relation to human fate ignited something in the soul of the proletarian. This touches upon the fact that many people who can only think about the proletariat and not with them form only very vague judgments, and indeed even harmful ones, in view of the serious events of the present, with the opinion that the head of the uneducated proletarian has been turned by Marxism and subsequent proletarian writers, along with all that we can often hear from this quarter. We do not come to an understanding of the historical world situation that is necessary in this field at present. Mm.
Okay, this is very dense and difficult to
Mm.
understand. So I'll just try to break it out for us. He's saying maybe something that we're familiar with, or to some extent, the idea of class consciousness. This
Mhm.
was a way that people could sort of identify as a class, as a kind of solidarity group. We are the working class. This is our identity, consciousness. And so we together, we can form unions, we can do things and stand up against the bad industrialists who are trying to exploit us and so on. Okay, this was fundamental to the ideology of the left wing.
Mhm.
And and so he's saying something new. He's saying, in addition, there's also this element of a scientific mentality to it, that somehow the idea of science has connected itself with this class consciousness. This is maybe not something that's very familiar to us or sort of commonly understood, but
Mhm.
he's saying it's actually very, very important.
Mhm.
So he'll go on to talk about this, but this is what he's saying in this first part.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'm not understanding how science is connected, but
Right.
yeah,
That
he'll talk
that will
about it.
come in the second part. Yeah.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
halfway through the paragraph, so it's
Yeah.
incomplete. Yeah. Maybe we'll read the second part and then we'll discuss it more. Okay.
Okay.
So in the second part that starts with because when we express, it's again a long chunk that goes halfway to the next page.
Mhm.
Um, he's going to say that the modern proletarian has not simply allowed themselves to be convinced by rational arguments set forth by Marxists. If we look deeper, we see how proletarian class consciousness is permeated by the scientific mentality. Now, back in January 1863, a guy named Ferdinand Lassalle gave a highly influential speech in which, among other things, he advocated for workers' rights, progressive social democracy, and producers' cooperatives with support from the state. Above all, he argued that science and knowledge was a shining sword that the working class needed to learn how to wield. It must not escape our attention how this view has shaped modern and radical demands of the contemporary labor movement. More than simply economics itself, the science of economics is what has taken hold of proletarian consciousness. This is quite evident in the current relevant literature. The modern proletarian allows the content of their consciousness to be defined in terms of scientific concepts. And even though they themselves may lack a formal education in science, they are continuously instructed about their life situation by those who have received a thorough scientific education. Okay, so if you can read that, please.
Interesting. Okay. Because when we express such an opinion, we merely show we have no will to draw attention to something essential in the current social movement. And this essential thing is the filling of the proletarian class consciousness with concepts that have taken their character from modern scientific development. Within this consciousness, what lived in Lassalle's speech, science and the working men, works on as a mood. Such things may seem insignificant to some who consider themselves to be practical people. However, anyone who wants to gain truly fruitful insight into the modern labor movement must pay attention to such things. In what moderate and radical proletarians are demanding today, it is surely not the economic life transformed into human impulses that lives, as some people imagine, but rather the economic science that has taken hold of the proletarian consciousness. This comes to light so clearly in both the scientifically oriented and the journalistically popularized literature of the proletarian movement. To deny this is to turn a blind eye to the real fact, and a fundamental fact that conditions the social situation of the present is that the modern proletarian allows the content of their class consciousness to be defined in terms of scientific concepts. No matter how far removed the person working on the machine may be from science, they listen to the explanations about their situation given by those who have received the means for this explanation from this science, in quotation marks. Hmm.
Okay. So he's kind of distinguishing between science as a something you learn in school, as something the educated class has an awareness of. He's distinguishing that from the scientific mentality, which is a kind of a need to conform to this kind of scientific view of the world. And he's saying even these, so-called, well, literally they were uneducated. They may have only got up to grade 6 or grade 8 education.
Mhm,
The working class, they didn't have a training in science, and yet they connected very strongly to the scientific mentality. They
mhm,
believed in science.
mhm,
And he points to this speech by Lassalle. Historically, so this was in Berlin in what it was the year 1863. He was arrested and he had to defend himself in court, and he gave a very eloquent speech about the working class, and he connected it to science, and this kind of inspired a generation of the working class. It kind of built it was the speech was published, written and published. It wasn't televised in those days. And so it inspired people to think about how could they use science as a way to to gain an understanding of economics and their life situation and how they could use science to get out of their desperate situation.
Hmm.
And
That's,
we can see this, we can track this from 1863 to even to today. I think it's evolved. But there's a tendency for, the social democrats, let's say, for example, in the United States, that would be the Democratic Party, or in Canada, the Liberal Party. They would have a tendency to connect to science as a principle of how they would understand the world.
mhm,
And this isn't necessarily true of other parties. The
mhm.
the scientific mentality is still a sort of fundamental core of the left wing.
This is so interesting. I had no idea of this.
Yeah, this is an
Hmm.
interesting assertion.
Mm. And I mean, because I'm wondering if he's going to say this next, because it's something, the science. I mean, we've heard this quite a bit. Um, I wonder because it's something, again, ideas that at the time, uneducated people would believe whoever the scientists were. And so, therefore, whatever their ideas were, we would take in because it's the science. Yeah? Is that kind of
Exactly.
where he's leading to? Hmm.
That's part of it. There's more to it
Okay.
than that.
Okay.
So I think this is where we should round off for today. We'll leave
Okay.
this question open to contemplate till our next podcast, and then we'll pick it up from there. Does that sound good?
Sounds great, Mike. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Take care.
Bye now. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like and subscribe.